The morning sun rose over the green hills of New Haven, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. Laura stood at the window of Children's home, watching the children play in the yard below. She held a cup of coffee in her hands and smiled as she counted the small figures running through the grass. 127 children called this place home, and Laura loved every single one of them. She had been a trauma nurse for 15 years before coming to New Haven. She had seen the worst things that could happen to people, but here, on this quiet colony world far from Earth, she had found peace. The children came from hard places. Some had lost parents to accidents. Others had been refugees from conflicts on distant worlds, but they found safety. They found love. They found a family. "Director," a small voice said from behind her. Laura turned to see Lily Morgan standing in the doorway. The 7-year-old girl had arrived at only 3 months ago. Her parents had died in a transport accident, and she rarely spoke to anyone. But lately, she had started coming to Laura's office in the mornings, just to sit quietly while Laura worked. "Good morning, Lily," Laura said warmly. "Did you sleep well?" Lily nodded and walked over to stand beside Laura at the window. She looked up at the sky with curious eyes. Laura noticed that the girl was holding a small stuffed rabbit, worn and faded from years of love. "The sky looks different today," Lily said softly. Laura looked up and felt her smile fade. There were shapes moving among the clouds, dark shapes that did not belong there. Her coffee cup slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. Far above the planet, a fleet of warships emerged from faster-than-light travel. Their hulls were black and covered in sharp angles, designed to inspire fear in all who saw them. On the bridge of the lead ship, High Commander stood with his arms folded behind his back. He was tall and thin, with gray skin and eyes that held no warmth. "Target confirmed," one of his officers reported. "The structure below contains only children and civilian staff. No military presence detected." "Excellent," said. "Humanity refused our demands for their mining rights. They need to understand what happens when lesser species defy the Dominion. Begin the bombardment." "High Commander, there are only children down there. Should we not select a military target instead?" Turned slowly to face the officer who had spoken. "Are you questioning my orders?" The officer lowered his gaze. "No, High Commander." "Good. The humans will break when they see what we are willing to do. All young species break eventually. Begin the attack and ensure our broadcast systems are recording. I want every human world to see this." On the surface, Laura grabbed Lily and ran. Alarms were screaming throughout the building as staff members rushed to gather the children. Laura shouted orders as she moved, her nurses' training taking over in the crisis. "Everyone to the basement shelter," she yelled. "Move quickly but do not run. Help the little ones." But there was no time. The first blast struck the east wing of the building, and the world became fire and noise. Laura threw herself over Lily as the ceiling collapsed around them. She felt pain beyond anything she had ever known, but she did not let go of the child beneath her. "Stay down, baby," Laura whispered. "I have got you, I have got you." The bombardment lasted 4 minutes. When it ended, Children's home was nothing but burning rubble and ash. 3 hours later, Commander Cole arrived with a rescue team from the nearby military outpost. He was a man of 42 years, with gray at his temples and lines on his face that spoke of hard experience. He had served Earth Fleet for 20 years and had seen the aftermath of battles and disasters across human space, but nothing had prepared him for what he found on New Haven. His soldiers spread out through the ruins, searching for survivors. Cole walked slowly through the destruction, his boots crunching on broken glass and charred wood. He saw small shoes scattered in the debris. He saw toys melted by heat. He saw things that would never leave his memory. "Commander," one of his soldiers called out, her voice breaking. "Over here, we found someone alive." Cole ran to where the soldier was kneeling. There, beneath the body of a woman who had used herself as a shield, was a small girl. She was covered in ash and blood, but she was breathing. She was clutching a stuffed rabbit to her chest. "Get a medical team here now," Cole ordered. He knelt beside the girl and gently touched her face. "You are safe now, can you hear me? You are safe." The girl's eyes opened. They were filled with a pain that no child should ever know. "The lady saved me," she whispered. "She told me to stay down." Cole looked at the woman's body. Her arms were still wrapped protectively around the space where the girl had been. Even in death, she had not let go. "What is your name?" Cole asked softly. Lily Morgan." Cole lifted Lily carefully into his arms and carried her away from the ruins. Around him, his soldiers had stopped searching. There was no one else to find. 126 children and 15 staff members had died in 4 minutes. Only Lily remained. The news reached Earth within hours. They had made sure to broadcast the attack across every communication network in the galaxy. They wanted humanity to see their power. They wanted humanity to be afraid. But something unexpected happened. There was no panic. There were no angry mobs in the streets. There were no desperate calls for surrender. Instead, a strange silence fell over human space. It was the silence of 12 billion people all feeling the same thing at the same time. Commander Cole stood in the ruins as the sun set over New Haven. He recorded a message and sent it to Earth Fleet Command. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. "This is Commander Cole reporting from New Haven Colony. The Dominion has attacked and destroyed children's home. 126 children are confirmed dead. 15 staff members are confirmed dead. There is one survivor, a 7-year-old girl named Lily Morgan. The attack was deliberate. The attack was broadcast. They killed our children, all of them, awaiting orders." He ended the recording and looked up at the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, the fleet was already gone, confident that their message had been received. They believed humanity would now beg for mercy. They believed humanity would surrender their mining rights and accept their place as a lesser species. They did not understand humans at all. In homes across 47 colony worlds, parents held their children a little that night. In military bases, soldiers watched the broadcast footage in silence. In government halls, leaders gathered behind closed doors. And in the hearts of 12 billion human beings, something cold and patient began to grow. They had wanted to teach humanity fear. Instead, they had made the worst mistake in the history of their empire. They had given humanity a reason to go to war. 3 days had passed since the attack on New Haven. On Earth, in the Great Hall of the United Human Coalition, President Daniel Foster sat alone at his desk. He was a man of 58 years, with kind eyes and a gentle voice that had won him the trust of billions. Before entering politics, he had been a teacher. He understood children. He understood what had been lost. On his desk was a photograph of his daughter, Emma. She had died in an accident 12 years ago at the age of 9. The pain had never left him. And now, looking at the reports from New Haven, that old wound had opened fresh. His assistant entered quietly. "Mr. President, the ambassador is demanding an audience. He says he is ready to discuss terms of surrender." Foster did not look up from the photograph. "Terms of surrender?" "Yes, sir. He seems to believe we will negotiate now." Foster was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Show him out. Do not speak to him. Do not answer any of his questions. Just show him out." The assistant hesitated. "Sir, is there any message you want me to give him?" "No, no message. Let him wonder." In another part of the coalition building, Admiral Christopher Hayes was addressing his senior commanders. Hayes was 61 years old, tall and lean, with white hair cut short and eyes the color of winter ice. He had fought in 3 wars during his career and had never lost a battle. But he was not known for aggression. He was known for patience. He would wait years for the right moment to strike. "Believe this is over," Hayes said, his voice calm and measured. They believe we will negotiate, surrender our mining rights, and accept their dominance. This is what every other young species has done when faced with their power. They expect us to behave the same way. He pressed a button, and a holographic map appeared above the table. It showed the Dominion, a vast empire spanning 200 star systems. They control more territory than we do. They have a larger fleet. They have been conquering species for 4,000 years. On paper, we cannot win a war against them. One of the commanders spoke up. Then what do we do, Admiral? Hayes smiled, but there was no warmth in it. We do something they have never seen before. We do not react in anger. We do not rush into battle. We take our time. We study them. We learn every weakness in their military, their economy, their government. And then when we are ready, we take everything from them. He pulled up another display. I am calling this operation Lasting Judgment. Full mobilization of all military forces. Complete conversion of civilian manufacturing to war production. Total commitment from every colony world. We are not going to fight a war. We are going to end an empire. Dr. Price, Chief of Human Intelligence, stepped forward. She was a woman of 45 with sharp features and sharper eyes. My teams have already begun gathering information on their military doctrine, their supply lines, their command structure. We will know them better than they know themselves before the first shot is fired. Hayes nodded. How long do you need? 6 months for a complete picture, but I can give you enough to begin planning within 3. Then we wait 6 months. We will not move until we are certain of victory. That evening, President Foster addressed humanity. His speech was broadcast to every world, every station, every ship in human space. 12 billion people stopped what they were doing to listen. Foster stood behind a simple podium with no decorations and no flags. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. 3 days ago, the Dominion attacked a children's home on New Haven Colony. They killed 126 children. They killed 15 caregivers who had dedicated their lives to protecting those children. They broadcast this attack across the galaxy as a message to us. They wanted us to be afraid. They wanted us to surrender. He paused and looked directly into the camera. I am not going to ask you to be angry. I am not going to ask you to hate. I am going to ask you to remember. Remember the names of those children. Remember that they were loved. Remember that they deserve to grow up, to fall in love, to have children of their own. Remember what was taken from them and from us. His voice remained steady, never rising above a conversational tone. They believe we are a young species. They believe we are weak. They believe we will break. Let me tell you what I believe. I believe that humanity protects its children. I believe that those who harm the innocent will face consequences. I believe that we will answer this crime not with rage but with resolve. He folded his hands on the podium. I am not going to tell you what we are planning. I am not going to make promises of revenge. I am only going to tell you this: we will remember. And one day, perhaps soon, perhaps later, they will understand what that means. The broadcast ended. Across human space, the response was immediate. Recruitment centers that normally processed a few dozen volunteers per day were overwhelmed with thousands. Factories that had been producing consumer goods began retooling for military equipment. Scientists who had been working on commercial projects volunteered for weapons research. There were no riots. There were no protests. There was only a quiet, unified determination that spread through every level of human society. On New Haven, Commander Cole was overseeing the recovery efforts when he received a message from Earth. Lily Morgan was to be brought to the capital. President Foster wanted to meet her personally. Cole found the girl sitting in a medical tent, still holding her stuffed rabbit. She had not cried since the attack. The doctors said she was in shock. Cole thought it was something else. He thought she was waiting. Lily, he said gently, kneeling beside her. Some people on Earth want to meet you. Important people. They want to make sure you are taken care of. Lily looked at him with her serious eyes. Will they find the ones who did this? Cole felt his throat tighten. Yes, I promise you they will. 1 week later, Lily Morgan stood in President Foster's office. She was so small that she barely reached his waist, but she looked up at him without fear. Foster knelt down so that he could meet her eyes. Hello, Lily. My name is Daniel. I am very sorry for what happened to you. The lady who saved me was named Laura, Lily said. She was nice. I am sure she was. She told me that good people protect each other. She said that is what makes us human. Foster felt tears forming in his eyes, but he did not let them fall. She was right, and I am going to make you a promise, Lily. The people who did this will answer for it. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they will answer. Do you believe me? Lily studied his face for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. Good, Foster said. He stood and took her hand. Now let me show you where you will be staying. I think you will like it here. In the halls of power, preparations continued. Admiral Hayes refined his plans. Dr. Price built her network of intelligence agents. Commanders trained their soldiers. Engineers designed new weapons. And across the galaxy, they waited for humanity's surrender. It never came. Instead, human space went dark. No communications, no trade, no diplomatic responses. They sent messages demanding negotiations. They received only silence. In his throne room on Prime, High Commander began to feel something he had not felt in decades. He did not have a name for it. He had never needed one. It was the first small seed of doubt. 6 months of silence had passed. In the great halls of the Dominion, confusion had turned to unease. High Commander stood before his Council of War, listening to reports that made no sense. We have sent 47 diplomatic messages, his communications officer reported. None have received a response. Human trading ships have stopped appearing at neutral stations. Their border patrols have pulled back to their core worlds. It is as if they have simply disappeared. Drummed his long fingers on the armrest of his throne. They are hiding. They are afraid. This is what young species do. Perhaps, said Admiral, his oldest commander. But I have studied the historical records. No species has ever gone completely silent after one of our demonstrations. They always negotiate. They always beg. Then the humans are simply slower than most. They will break eventually. But did not sound as certain as he once had. Far from space, at a neutral observation station, a diplomat named Al was recording his thoughts. He belonged to the Syndicate of Free Worlds, a coalition of species that had remained neutral in galactic conflicts for centuries. His job was to observe and document. He had watched many wars begin and end. Day 180 of the human silence, he spoke into his recorder. I have studied every known response to aggression. 43 species have faced similar demonstrations of power. All 43 negotiated within 30 days. Most surrendered completely. The humans have done nothing. They have said nothing. I do not know what this means, but I find myself increasingly uncomfortable. He paused and looked out the window at the stars. There is an old saying among my people. The loudest storms begin with the quietest winds. I wonder if we are about to witness such a storm. On the edge of human space, Captain Benjamin Tor stood on the bridge of the carrier unyielding. He was 38 years old with dark hair and steady hands. Behind him, the crew worked in perfect silence. They had trained for this moment for 6 months. They knew their roles. They knew their targets. They knew why they were fighting. Tors looked at the tactical display showing 7 border systems. In each system, a human fleet waited in the darkness between stars, hidden by stealth technology that they did not know existed. All ships report ready, Lieutenant Cross announced. She was young, only 26, with red hair pulled back in a tight braid. Her brother had been stationed at the New Haven outpost. He had been among the first to respond to the attack on. He had carried the bodies of children out of the rubble. He had never been the same. Tors nodded. Signal from Admiral Hayes. Just came in, sir. Operation Lasting Judgment is authorized. All fleets to attack simultaneously in 30 seconds. Tors took a deep breath. Sound general quarters, all hands to battle stations. Across 7 star systems, human warships powered up their weapons. They had spent 6 months learning everything about military doctrine. They knew how they deployed their ships, how their commanders thought, how their crews reacted under pressure. They knew the weaknesses in their shield frequencies, the blind spots in their sensor arrays, the gaps in their formation patterns. The humans had not been hiding in fear. They had been preparing. Tors watched the countdown reach 0. All ships engage. The battle for Station Omega lasted 4 hours. It was the largest military installation on the Dominion's border, home to 300 warships and 50,000 soldiers. The commanders had believed it was untouchable. They were wrong. Human ships emerged from stealth in perfect formation, catching the fleet completely off guard. The first wave of missiles struck before the defenders could even raise their shields. Human fighters swarmed through the confusion, targeting command ships and communications arrays. Within the first hour, they had lost their ability to coordinate their defense. On the Unyielding, Lieutenant Cross tracked the battle with cold precision. She felt nothing when she saw ships exploding. She had buried her feelings 6 months ago, along with her brother's sanity. Enemy flagship is attempting to retreat, she reported. Should I order pursuit? Tors shook his head. Let them go. I want survivors. I want them to tell others what happened here. By the end of the 4th hour, Station Omega had fallen. 273 warships had been destroyed. Human losses were 18 ships. The efficiency was terrifying. And it was just the beginning. Across all 7 border systems, the story was the same. Human fleets struck with overwhelming force and perfect coordination. Installations that had stood for centuries fell in hours. Military bases were destroyed. Supply lines were cut. Communications were jammed. Observer Al watched the reports come in with growing horror. He had seen wars before. He had never seen anything like this. The humans are not fighting like any species I have documented, he recorded. They are not seeking glory or territory. They are systematically dismantling the military capability. Every attack is designed to cripple, not to conquer. They are not waging a war. They are conducting an execution. On Prime, High Commander received the news in his throne room. For the first time in his long life, he felt fear. How is this possible? He demanded. They are a young species. They should not have this capability. They have been preparing, Admiral said quietly. For 6 months while we waited for their surrender, they were preparing for this. They studied us. They found our weaknesses, and now they are exploiting every single one. Then we strike back. We send the main fleet to Earth. We burn there to ash. Shook his head slowly. High Commander, our scouts report that Earth's defense grid is fully automated. The human fleet is not there. They have committed everything to the offensive. If we attack Earth, we accomplish nothing while they continue to destroy our military. Slammed his fist against his throne. Then what do you suggest? I suggest we negotiate. I suggest we offer them whatever they want to stop this. Never. The Dominion does not surrender to lesser species. Looked at his commander with something like pity. Then, I suggest you prepare for the end of everything we have built. In the weeks that followed, human forces pushed deeper into space. They did not occupy territory. They did not claim resources. They simply destroyed military targets and moved on, leaving civilian populations unharmed but isolated. The message was clear. This was not about conquest. This was about punishment. Captain Tors led his fleet through system after system, never slowing, never stopping. He thought about the children of. He thought about Laura, who had died protecting a little girl. He thought about Lily Morgan, who had lost everything. When his crew asked why they fought so hard, he always gave the same answer. Because someone has to answer for what was done, and we are the ones doing the asking. Observer Al sent his final report to the syndicate before human forces moved too deep into territory for neutral observers to follow. I have watched the rise and fall of empires, he recorded. I have seen species fight and die for countless reasons, but I have never seen anything like humanity's response to the attack on their children. Other species ask me why the humans are fighting so hard for 127 dead. They do not understand. The humans are not fighting for the dead. They are fighting because of what the dead represent. They are fighting because their children are sacred to them. And they will not stop until everyone who was responsible has been brought to justice. He paused before adding his final observation. I do not know what the galaxy will look like when this war ends, but I know this: no one will ever attack human children again. 1 year had passed since the attack on children's home. In that time, the galaxy had watched the impossible happen. The Dominion, an empire that had stood for 4,000 years, was dying. High Commander stood in his throne room on Prime, staring at a holographic map that showed the collapse of everything he had built. 70% of Dominion territory was now in human hands. 140 star systems had fallen. 12,000 warships had been destroyed. Another surrender request has been ignored, Admiral reported. His voice was hollow, defeated. This is the third time we have offered unconditional terms. They respond with the same message every time. Already knew the words by heart. The humans had sent them 3 times now in response to every attempt at negotiation. The message was always the same: unconditional, complete, no terms. What do they want? Asked, though he already knew the answer. They want us to fall, High Commander. They want to destroy everything we are. Turned away from the map. For the first time in centuries, he looked old. I gave the order to attack that orphanage. I thought it would break them. I thought they were like every other young species. They are not like any species we have encountered, said. They do not fight for territory or resources. They do not fight for glory. They fight because we hurt their children, and they will not stop until we have paid for that completely. In a command center deep within human-controlled territory, Director Myra Stone was reviewing files. She was 42 years old, with gray eyes and a face that rarely showed emotion. She led the Human War Crimes Documentation Division, a unit created specifically for this conflict. Her job was not to fight. Her job was to remember. How many confirmed atrocities now? She asked her assistant. 4,216 documented incidents across history. 23 species were completely destroyed. 31 species were enslaved. Millions of civilians were killed in demonstration attacks like the one on New Haven. Stone nodded slowly, and we have evidence for all of them. Yes, Director. Recovered records, survivor testimonies, physical evidence. They kept detailed files of their crimes. They were proud of what they did. Then make sure every piece of evidence is transmitted to every neutral species in the galaxy. I want everyone to understand exactly what kind of empire we are bringing down. The truth spread across the stars like wildfire. Species that had remained neutral began to condemn the Syndicate of Free Worlds, which had never taken sides in any conflict, issued a formal statement supporting humanity's actions. One by one, the allies abandoned them, terrified of being associated with an empire that had murdered children as a political strategy. On Prime, the end came on a cold morning. Human ships filled the sky above the throne world. The planetary defense fleet, once the most powerful in the galaxy, had been destroyed in 6 hours. Now ground forces were landing across the surface, moving toward the capital city with unstoppable precision. Sergeant Samuel Wright led his unit through the streets of the capital. He was 35 years old, with broad shoulders and hands that had been built for hard work. He had grown up on New Haven. 2 of his cousins had been on the day of the attack. Their bodies had never been recovered. Enemy resistance is light, his corporal reported. Most of the soldiers are surrendering without a fight. Wright nodded. Process them and move on. We are not here for the soldiers. We are here for the ones who gave the orders. They reached the imperial palace as the sun was setting. The massive building loomed against the darkening sky, all sharp angles and black stone. It had been designed to inspire fear. Now it looked like nothing more than an empty monument to a dying empire. The palace guards threw down their weapons as Wright's unit approached. They had seen what happened to those who resisted. They had no desire to die for a commander who had doomed them all. Inside, Wright found sitting on his throne. The High Commander was alone. His advisors had fled. His guards had surrendered. He had nothing left except his pride. Human said, his voice still carrying authority despite everything. Have you come to kill me? Wright walked slowly up the steps to the throne. He looked at the alien who had ordered the death of 126 children. He felt rage burning in his chest, but he kept it controlled. This moment was too important for rage. No, Wright said, we do not kill prisoners, we are not like you. Laughed bitterly, then what do you want? Admiral Christopher Hayes walked into the throne room. He was still calm, still measured, just as he had been on the day he first presented Operation Lasting Judgment. He approached the throne and stood beside Wright. We want two things, Hayes said. First, we want you to understand what you did, not just the attack on all of it, every species you destroyed, every civilization you crushed, every child you killed across 4,000 years of conquest. His eyes narrowed, and the second thing. We want everyone else to understand what happens when you do it. You will stand trial before a galactic tribunal. You will face the evidence of every crime your empire committed. And when you are found guilty, the entire galaxy will know that there are consequences for harming the innocent. Looked at Hayes with something that might have been respect. You are not what I expected. I thought humans would come with fire and vengeance. I thought you would torture me, execute me publicly, make an example of me. Hayes shook his head slowly. That is what you would have done. That is what you expected because that is all you understand. But we are not you. We do not need vengeance. We need justice. There is a difference. He turned to Wright. Take him into custody. Make sure he is treated according to the laws of war. He will have a fair trial. Yes, Admiral. As Wright's soldiers led away, Director Stone's teams moved through the palace, collecting records. They found files documenting thousands of years of atrocities. They found trophies taken from conquered species. They found evidence that the High Command had known exactly what they were doing when they attacked. Within days, the evidence was transmitted across the galaxy. Species that had never cared about human affairs suddenly paid attention. They saw the records of crimes. They saw the testimonies of survivors. They understood that humanity had not fought a war of conquest, but a war of justice. The galactic community, which had remained neutral for so long, now condemned though with one voice. The Dominion was finished. Its territory would be divided among the species that had been enslaved for. Its leaders would face trial. Its crimes would be remembered forever. On the bridge of the Unyielding, Captain Tors watched the final reports come in. The war was over. They had won. Lieutenant Cross stood beside him, looking out at the stars. Is it enough? She asked quietly. Does this bring back the children? Does this heal what was broken? Tors was silent for a long moment. No, he said finally. Nothing can bring them back. Nothing can undo what happened. But maybe this means it will never happen again. Maybe this means that somewhere in the future, children will be safe because of what we did here. Cross nodded slowly. My brother asked me why we fought so hard for 127 children. I did not have an answer for him at the time. And now I think the answer is that we fought because they mattered. Because every life matters. Because if we are not willing to fight for the most vulnerable among us, then we do not deserve to call ourselves human. Tors put a hand on her shoulder. That is as good an answer as any. On Prime, the sun set on an empire that would never rise again. And across the galaxy, species that had once feared humanity now looked at them with something new. Not fear, not hatred, something closer to hope. If the humans could do this, if they could bring down an empire for the sake of 126 children, then maybe the galaxy could become something better than it had been. Maybe there was still room for justice among the stars. 5 years had passed since the attack on Children's Home. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Dominion was gone, erased from the map of civilizations. Its territory had been divided among the species that had suffered under its rule. Former slaves now governed their own worlds. Former victims now built their own futures. And humanity, once considered a young and insignificant species, had become something else entirely. On the former throne world of Prime, a galactic tribunal had concluded its work. High Commander and 3,000 war criminals had been tried, convicted, and sentenced. The trials had been broadcast across every network, ensuring that the crimes of the Dominion would never be forgotten. Ambassador Caroline Nash represented humanity on the newly formed Galactic Justice Council. She was 53 years old, with silver-streaked hair and a voice that commanded attention without ever rising above a conversational tone. She had been chosen for this role not because she was aggressive, but because she understood something important. True strength came not from conquest, but from principle. "The humans continue to surprise us," Elder Al said during a council session. He had been promoted from observer to diplomat, his reports on the war now studied in academies across the galaxy. "We offered them the throne world. They refused. We offered them the Dominion's resource systems. They refused. We offered them permanent military control of 30 sectors. They refused." A representative from another species leaned forward. "Then what do they want? Every species that wins a war takes something from the defeated." Nash smiled softly. "We did not fight for territory or resources. We fought because the hurt our children. That wrong has been answered. Taking their empire would not bring those children back. It would only make us into something we do not want to be." Al made a note in his records. "I have studied humanity for 5 years now. I still do not fully understand them. But I have learned this. They do not measure victory in conquered worlds or accumulated wealth. They measure it in something they call principle. I am still learning what that means." On New Haven, the green hills had healed. The scars of the bombardment had been covered by new growth, and the colony had rebuilt itself stronger than before. At the site where Children's Home had once stood, a memorial now rose against the sky. It was simple in design, a wall of white stone, curved like an embrace, with 127 names carved into its surface. At the base of the wall, flowers and small offerings had been placed by visitors from across human space. A path led from the memorial to a new building that stood nearby, surrounded by gardens and playgrounds. The New Haven Children's Home was larger than had been. It housed 200 children now, orphans from across human space who had found a family here. And every day they walked past the memorial, learning the names of those who had come before them. Today was the 5th anniversary of the attack, and a ceremony was being held. Thousands of people had gathered, including veterans of the war, government officials, and ordinary citizens who simply wanted to pay their respects. At the center of the gathering stood a 12-year-old girl with serious eyes and brown hair that fell past her shoulders. She was no longer the frightened child who had been pulled from the rubble. She had grown into someone remarkable, someone who carried her loss with grace and used it to help others. Lily Morgan had been adopted by Daniel Foster after the war. He had retired from the presidency to focus on raising her, though she still called him by his first name. They had built something together, a family born from grief but sustained by love. Now she stood at the podium looking out at the crowd. Her hands were steady, her voice was clear. "I was 7 years old when I lost everyone I knew," she began. "I remember the sound of the bombs falling. I remember the fire and the smoke. And I remember the lady who saved me. Her name was Laura. She put her arms around me and told me to stay down. She used her own body to protect me. She died so that I could live." She paused, looking down at her notes, then set them aside. "People ask me sometimes how I feel about the war. They ask me if I am glad that they were defeated. They ask me if I feel that justice was done." She looked up at the crowd. "I do not think about justice or war or revenge. I think about Laura. I think about the other caregivers who died trying to protect the children. I think about the love they showed in their last moments. And I think about what that means." Her voice grew stronger. "They attacked us because they thought we were weak. They thought that killing children would break us. But they did not understand what they were really seeing. They did not understand that our willingness to die for each other was not weakness. It was the source of our strength." She gestured to the memorial behind her. "These names are not just a record of the dead. They are a reminder of who we are. We are a species that protects its children. We are a species that answers harm with justice. We are a species that refuses to become the thing we are fighting against." She took a breath. "I am alive because Laura loved me enough to die for me, and every day I try to be worthy of that love, not through anger, not through hatred, but through kindness, through caring for others, through being the kind of person she believed I could become." She stepped back from the podium. "Thank you." The applause that followed was not loud or wild. It was something deeper, a wave of respect that washed through the crowd. People were crying quietly. Veterans stood at attention. Children from the new home watched with wide eyes, understanding that something important was happening. After the ceremony, Admiral Hayes walked alone through the memorial gardens. He had aged in the past 5 years, his hair now completely white, his face lined with the weight of the decisions he had made. He had retired from the military after the war, unable to continue after everything he had seen. He stopped at the base of the memorial wall and looked up at the names. He had memorized them all. He whispered them sometimes in his sleep. From his pocket he pulled a small object, a stuffed rabbit, worn and faded, recovered from the ruins of. He had kept it for 5 years, waiting for the right moment to let it go. He knelt and placed the rabbit at the base of the wall, among the flowers and offerings left by others. "I am sorry I could not save you," he whispered, "but I hope you know that we tried. We tried to make sure it would never happen again." He stood there for a long time, head bowed, remembering. On the other side of the memorial, Lily Morgan watched him. She recognized the rabbit. It had belonged to one of the younger children, a boy named who had been only 4 years old. He used to carry it everywhere. She walked over to the Admiral and stood beside him without speaking. After a moment, she reached out and took his hand. Hayes looked down at her, surprised. "You are Lily Morgan." "I know who you are too, Admiral. You are the one who made sure justice was done." Hayes shook his head. "I am just a soldier who followed orders. The real heroes are the ones whose names are on that wall." Lily squeezed his hand. "Laura told me once that heroes are not the ones who seek glory. They are the ones who do what needs to be done, even when it costs them everything. I think that makes you a hero too." Hayes felt tears forming in his eyes. For the first time since the war began, he let them fall. "Thank you," he whispered. They stood together in silence, the old soldier and the young girl, united by loss and hope and the memory of those who had been taken too soon. Above them, the sun shone down on New Haven, warm and bright. In the gardens of the new children's home, laughter echoed among the trees. Life had returned to this place of sorrow. Joy had found a way to bloom among the ruins. And somewhere, watching from beyond the stars, 126 children smiled. Their sacrifice had not been in vain. Their memory would live forever, and the galaxy would never forget what humanity had done in their name. Not for conquest, not for glory, but for love. Always and only for love.